My cameraman, who's from Toronto, noticed something from this blockade that I would have totally missed.
Oh shit.
The pylons that these eco-radicals were using were not from a local pylon shop.
They were actually from the city of Toronto. Someone came from Toronto with these pylons with the intent of stopping industry. There's a cross-country, maybe even global effort to stop not just the forestry industry, but the oil and gas industry and every other industry.
An 8-year-old young man in Washington who was looking on some satellite imagery and saw that they were building logging roads, and he reached out and made sure that people who might come to action would be here.
You've successfully politically persuaded John Horgan, especially during an election, to not, even send in the RCMP to pull you guys out.
It's not so much the big corporations that they affect families. Families like mine. I have 3 kids, beautiful wife, and all I'm doing is trying to make a living.
There's boatloads of people who have a notion or an idea that what they're doing is right by stopping good, hardworking people from going to work in a great industry.
Eco-radical blockades are becoming more and more frequent across Canada.
What?
You may have noticed.
You guys are in my way!
You may have even lost your job to these radicals, these interlopers who you might find on a railroad track or blockading an oil and gas worksite, a pipeline, or a forestry worksite. One thing these radicals all share in common is that they use the mainstream media, or perhaps work in consort with them, and radical leftist outlets into duping or hoodwinking government officials in BC or the federal government across Canada into thinking that these radicals share the majority opinion with the general population. That's obviously not the case, and Rebel News needed to look into this. So we did. We embedded ourselves in an eco-radical blockade on the west side of Vancouver Island to dig deep and to find out what was going on at these blockades. What were their tactics, what were their plans, and what was their message?
Whoa, did you see that? They have an orange cone and it has the word Toronto on it.
We are the people. We have a voice, and it's our right to use it.
Climate action! Do you think that they grasp the carnage that they create?
I don't think they care.
Whoa.
They say logging's bad.
Whoa.
And yet, the things they do to prepare the ground for new trees is exactly what logging has done.
Cutting permits are being held up because you've got, environmental groups being funded out of Toronto or the David Suzuki Foundation.
Extremists like David Suzuki have worked
Whoa, extremist David Suzuki. If y'all don't know David Suzuki, he hosts a show in Canada called The Nature of Things, where he tries to explain things mostly about climate change. He's kind of like Canada's soft, old, lovable grandfather who loves to talk about climate change. He was in an internment camp when he was very young. He's lived his whole life as an activist. He's old school. He's pretty much the exact opposite of like a scary far leftist extremist, but I'm sure they'll paint him as such.
To lie and to change the facts to fit their narrative, to change government policy and destroy jobs, lives, and families.
My God.
That's what we're up against, and that is what Rebel News came here to expose. As we delve into this story to understand why extremists like David Suzuki are targeting the forestry industry, it's important that we talk about the facts. You can't change facts, and if you're armed with them, it disarms the radicals. That's why David Suzuki doesn't want you to hear what I'm about to tell you. Canada has the most rigorous environmental standards in the world, and we also have one of the largest forests in the world, making up 9% of all forests globally. 348 million hectares, in fact, of Canadian soil is forested. Only 0.02% of forested land in Canada has ever been replaced with something else, has ever been deforested. Canadian forests are not.
So everything he's saying about the amount of forests in Canada, that part is true. The fact that we have the most rigorous environmental laws in the world, that is not true.
Now, this data isn't from some forestry lobby. This is actually from the government of Canada, one of the most left-wing governments in the entire world.
Also, not true. We have the neoliberals in power. They're not left-wing. They're centrist at best. I mean, they're socially and performatively woke. They'll come in front of the camera and they'll talk to you about how we need to, help out the black members of society, while the same person saying that is also dressed up in blackface. So that's kind of what you get. That's Canada wokeness.
Now, deforestation is a problem, globally that is, but in Canada, not so much. In fact, the forestry industry in Canada helps promote the growth of new forests, helps replace and replenish and avoid wildfires. Forests replacing itself, which is something that it naturally wants to do, but is unable to in most cases because of the radical green lobby from the early 2000s telling everyone to not cut down a single tree, to not prepare for wildfires. Now with that, we are...
Okay, so just some quick things to fill in the anecdote Andy's over here. I do have friends who work in the forestry industry of Canada, and there is certainly some validity to the fact that they are told and they want to make sure they preserve the natural ecosystems of the country. That is on the agenda. Whether or not they follow through on that is another story. One of the big things they do is, yes, they have to replenish and replant trees that have been cultivated. However, we do it with trees that grow a lot quicker. And one of the problems with trees that grow a lot quicker is, unfortunately, they burn a lot easier. And that's one of the problems you'll see both in Canada and the same problem is happening in California, where all of a sudden these wildfires are taking over and they're burning up these forests so very quick. One of the reasons is these old forests, the old trees we used to have, those trees take hundreds, if not some of them, hundreds upon hundreds of years to grow. The new ones we replace them with grow a lot quicker for the simple reason, of course, we're cutting them faster than we're growing them, and they unfortunately are a lot more combustible.
And we are on our way across the southern coast of the island to make our way west.
We landed in Victoria, just at the airport here. We have to keep going, I think, all the way up to Port Renfrew. We're going off directions that the hippies laid for us, actually. They gave directions to everyone who wanted to come join their blockade, so we're following those. And I think it's right about here, and then we have to go all the way up here to underneath where this is actually not, covered by the map. My guess is they have no idea how much old growth forest is actually protected in BC. That's what their whole point is that this is somehow the last remaining old growth forest of something rather, and their point isn't very clear, but they have no idea what they're talking about.
My cameraman and I drove across the vast forests of Vancouver Island, down...
This has been like 3 minutes of them just being lost and considering this content. And while he's lost, he's like, the hippies tricked me. Oh, we can't find the place. Goddamn fucking hippies. All part of the conspiracy, by the way.
Bridges and rivers and up service roads into areas where there was...
By the way, this is my province. Anyone, if you're wondering where I live, this is what parts of BC look like. It's enormous, it's vast, it's huge, and it's absolutely fucking gorgeous. It's like endless trees and mountains.
All to find a blockade that was advertising itself online as a blockade fighting against the company Teal Jones. Teal Jones is a forestry operation based out of Burnaby, and they were logging, or at least trying to log, this area near Fairy Creek. After driving for hours, after turning the final corner down a service road, following a map used by these blockaders posted online so that others could find them, we did exactly that.
Hi there, how are you guys?
After explaining to them my journalistic relationship with Greta Thunberg, they welcomed...
Journalistic relationship? What, you have one photo? This motherfucker is the fucking swarmy ghoul, by the way, who even Jagmeet Singh wouldn't respond to. When there was that press conference where he was like, by the way, I'm here from Rebel News, sir. I'd like to ask you some questions. He was like, nah, fuck y'all. You're like, I know what the fuck you do.
me in as one of their own. Now, to be fair to them, they were quite nice. Although they were only nice, I presume, because they thought I was a leftist. I was going to be there as a...
Oh, yes, that's why. Okay, great. What fucking journalistic integrity?
Like the CBC would, or perhaps one of the leftist alternative outlets like Vice News, so that I could repeat their story and broadcast it to a larger audience. Now, that's not why I was there. I was there to get the other side of the story.
Oh.
So the old growth protection is what the goal is for all of us, is to have, because we have less than like 3% of high productivity old growth remaining in BC. So these are endangered ecosystems. It's not just about the forest, like the trees. We don't want to just see the forest for the trees. We see the forest for all the life forms that depend on it. And trees like the high productivity old growth coastal Douglas fir, it's not a specific logging company that we have issues with. We have issues with the politics. When you look at the legislation around, like when a company has a cut block or a TFL that they have to leave, there's a clause where you have to leave. I think it's 10% of old growth in that area. Well, that's kind of a loophole because there's high productivity and low productivity old growth, and high productivity are our massive carbon filters. So they're responsible for 25% of our atmospheric carbon filtration in the world. In a time of climate crises, to me, it seems disastrous to take these natural filters that keep our water clean, that keep our air clean, that create habitat.
Listen to this filthy
these are
hippie.
all of our issues that way.
Listen to
Coming
this
from
hippie
Alberta,
gibberish.
Conservative government. It's strange to come to BC where there's an NDP government, which someone calls socialist. Why are they not on your side?
Well, no, I wouldn't necessarily say that NDP is not on our side. They walk a fine line, in my opinion. They like to verbally express their care for our environment. They've just come out with their report on old growth conservation, and they've deferred the logging of certain old growth forests, which I think is very, very small. When we have such a small percentage left, it should be encompassing all. But what is a deferral? And that a deferral is putting it off until later. It's not creating a protection. It's creating a temporary pacification.
To say I was confused at this point would be an understatement. When armed with the facts, it's clear that the crisis that these eco-radicals were trying to sell me was simply a fabrication. They wished that there was a crisis,
Interviewed
but there
her
was none
for
to be had, only
a full
formerly
2 minutes.
thriving industry.
After listening to her for 2 minutes, it was clear that they had no idea what they were talking about, and I was confused, to say the very least.
That has now since lost thousands of jobs. I was curious what could compel eco-radicals like this, 9 or 10 of them, to bring their children out past any form of civilization. No cell reception, no running water, no plumbing, for weeks on end to blockade this one forestry operation. And also, what happens downstream?
He also just can't wrap his head around that, eh? He's like, no cell reception. How do these barbarians live? These filthy hippies. No cell reception? How do they look up the pornos? What do they do when they need the pornos? What do they do to jerk?
What happens to the jobs, the men and women who are no longer able to put food on their table for their children? For that side of the story, we have to fast forward. I had the opportunity to join a tugboat operation on the Fraser River, an operation that employed Randy Price, an indigenous man from Haida Gwaii, the Queen Charlotte Islands you might know them as. Now Randy, a father and a husband, an indigenous man, works in this industry and depends on it
like
to
he
put
said
food
indigenous
on the
3
table
times
of his
now.
children.
It's not
Got that
it's not
got that
so
in
much
pull.
the big corporations that they affect families like mine. I have 3 kids, beautiful wife, and all I'm doing is trying to make a living. And it's hard enough with the COVID right now than to have to deal with eco radicals. It's not fair to the working man.
How do you feel when they use the indigenous name? Basically, one indigenous person gave them the right to protest in the name of all indigenous people, and it was all white people.
I'll tell you what, it doesn't. I don't really go for that.
I love how the reporter too is like, how do you feel about them using you as a token, as I now use you as a token? Let's see how this goes.
Their job is to create havoc. My job is to look after my kids and family, and to look after my parents and my wife's parents, and so on, and the family, and it's a big responsibility. So for them to come into my home and tell me what I should do.
Okay, now say the 14 words.
I don't
Could you imagine?
And I think it's very unfair.
Can we just get you to say the 14 words now, sir?
However they get paid,
Come on, we need you to secure our homeland.
Whatever they do is not fair for me. But nothing gets done.
On Canadian soil, we're being threatened with death. upon appearing at their worksite. Just imagine if a teacher was threatened with a shotgun every time she appeared on the school grounds in the morning. No, it wasn't just that. I had heard.
By the way, the Haida Gwaii protests, if you didn't know this, these ones are really sad. In British Columbia, the Haida Gwaii community said very firmly at the very start of the entire COVID panic, please stop vacationing on Haida Gwaii land. We do not have the resources to be able to help our community if we have a COVID outbreak. We don't have the same hospitals as you. We don't have the same access to healthcare as you. Please stay off our land. This is really important. Please, because Haida Gwaii's areas, they're very popular tourist destinations. It's very beautiful. There's a lot of beach shore property, stuff like that. And no one listened. No one listened. They kept visiting the Haida Gwaii land. They kept vacationing there. Surprise, surprise, there was a COVID outbreak. And yes, surprise, surprise, they weren't able to deal with it. It was a tragic event.
And Spice, in a story that I covered months and months ago in northern British Columbia. Anne Spice was actually one of the coordinators of a blockade that had nothing to do with this forestry industry. It seems like she is a professional blockader, using violence to get her way.
Like, what is going on in society today that accepts that kind of behavior?
Well, they can basically say you don't have the right to be here, but at the end of the day, the areas, like I said, are so massive. Like, we're talking about huge areas of just like shorefront property. It's not that easy for them to suddenly, like, they don't have any kind of what you consider like a military or a police force. There's nothing to be able to stop people from just saying, yeah, let's just vacation here as some kind of like destination.
My cameraman, who's from Toronto, noticed something from this blockade that I would have totally missed.
Oh shit.
The pylons that these eco-radicals were using were not from a local pylon shop.
They were actually from the city of Toronto. Someone came from Toronto with these pylons with the intent of stopping industry. There's a cross-country, maybe even global effort to stop not just the forestry industry, but the oil and gas industry and every other industry that seems to benefit Indigenous people and lift them out of poverty and push them into prosperity.
It's been 30 years of constant badgering and bombarding of this idea that what the forest industry is on the BC coast is absolutely opposite of the truth. Absolute opposite. The evidence is there, and the reason why the evidence is there, after logging for 100+ years on the BC coast, is the trees grew back. The forests grew back. They're different. Yeah, of course they're different. You know, they're not old growth forests, you know, with dead decaying trees falling everywhere and great big glorious looking, you know, eye candy trees. You know, it's different, but they grew back.
Eye candy.
There is a crisis brewing in the Canadian forestry industry, and you probably didn't even know it. Just as Canada's oil and gas industry faces eco-extremists, eco-terrorists, and eco-radicals, so does our forestry industry.
By the way, like, just so you know, this is the same thing with people pushing up against like Black Lives Matter movement or any kind of movement of the people. Y'all are winning. The oil industry, it's doing just fine. The oil industry has a lot of power. It's not as if like, oh no, the poor oil and gas sector. Oh no, what are they gonna do? What's happening?
After documenting and joining eco-blockades on Vancouver Island and boarding a forestry tugboat operation on the Fraser River, we've gone deeper than ever before into unmasking and exposing the people on the front lines of the war on Canadian industry. We did the job that we expected of the mainstream media, but recently they've been dropping the ball. We've had this opportunity to do this work because of your support. If you go to BC Blockade.
This is the picture you chose. Fucking Tucker Carlson looking motherfucker. Like, God damn.
You're a lying dog-faced pony soldier.
Hey, we want to mutual aid you to get some eyeballs on your work. So if you have a leftist YouTube channel or Twitch stream or something you want us to advertise, just send us a 20 to 30 second ad using the forums at weareserfs.com. We'll do our best to help you out. And please submit once per channel.
To our gods, Unwrapped, and Xander Quarters, we shall build temples in your honor. To our monarch, Tom Spiker, we live to do your bidding. To our lords, Jeffrey Lamb, Trevor R., Stephen, Ninetails Cosmic Fox, Aunt Josephine, Poppy Nelson, Ryan Lubin, Jimothy K. Meeble Beeps Jr. We bow meekly for your pleasure. And to our Knights of the Round Table, Josh Mickelson, Dylan Veit, Zach Christensen, Todd Buckingham, Todd Lajeunesse, Political Puppy, Ali Menthal, Jimmy Big Nuts, Andreas Chitoro, Good Poon Hates Cops, That's Solid Poon Then, Dr. Zayas, Joppy, Violent Orchard, Sophie Baby, Jack Darko, Thomas Barrington, J. Fraser Cartwright, Goofalankius, Melissa Murphy, Nicholas Marks, Alexander Thaler, Ramon Acosta, and Ali Retta Jaffer. We salute you. Love you all. Peace.